Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that will be seeking funding on Kickstarter soon, and that game is called The King's Abbey from designer Randy Rathard. Now, when the campaign launches, I'm going to have a link at the bottom of the screen and also down in the comments section. If you like what you see in this video, I would encourage you to go to the project page, find out some more information, and consider backing the campaign. Now, the theme of The King's Abbey is that there is this medieval kingdom just coming out of the Dark Ages, or starting to come out of the Dark Ages, and the king, in order to give hope to the people, wants to build abbeys around the land. You, as one of the players in the game, is leading a team of monks who want to build one of those abbeys. And you're going to do that through worker placement and resource management. The workers in this case are the monks that are represented by dice that you have. You're going to roll the monks, put them around the, use them around the board in order to gather resources that you need in order to build the abbey. But of course, there's the ever-encroaching fear of the darkness permeating the land, stopping you and stopping the game before you're able to accomplish your task. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of The King's Abbey, designed by Randy Rathard. Now, this game is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. The theme of the game is that you are trying to build an abbey in the medieval times during the Dark Ages, as ordered by the king in order to give the people of the land hope. You need to earn enough prestige by the end of 7 rounds, and you're going to do that by building up your abbey as much as possible, all whilst fighting off the darkness round after round. The darkness in this case being a representation of things like plague and famine and pestilence and Viking raids, things like that. All the typical things that you'd have to worry about back in the Dark Ages. Now, a couple things I want to point out here. First off, this game is going to be on Kickstarter soon, and when the project launches, I'm going to have a link down at the bottom of the screen and also down in the comment section for you to follow. If you're interested in what you see here in the video, you can go to the campaign page, learn more information, and consider backing the project. Also, this is an early version of the game. As good as it looks, there may be some things that will change during the course of the campaign because of funding. When the final project is finished, it may look different from what you see here. Even some design elements may change as well, so please keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the overview. Now, The King's Abbey is a resource management and worker placement game. In this case, the workers are monks who are trying to build this abbey, and your abbey is represented by a player board that each player is going to have. I just don't have the other ones pictured on camera. And you have the dice representing the monks, and you're going to roll them every round and then place them on different parts of your player board and also out in the fields in order to get different types of resources and build up the part of your abbey, and also to defend it against the darkness. The different types of resources are wood, grain, sand, and stone, and of course coins. You have a prestige track around the board which keeps tracks of what are essentially victory points, and you'll start off over here in different places depending on who is the star player. So the star player, because they're going first, they also have to take a deficit of points. So in this case, blue's going first and starts at 5. Then the other players start at 6, 7, and 8. Obviously, if there were less players, it would look a little bit different. You have a darkness tracker that you can start on either the bottom 3 or the top 3 in order to, depending on whether you want a basic or a difficult game. The darkness is going to be attacking every round, and you need to have your defenses up in order to take care of it. So the game is going to be played over the course of 7 rounds, which means in the final rounds, you'll either have to deal with a darkness level of 8 or 9, which can be pretty bad. These different stacks of cards here represent the building market. You'll have 2 randomized stacks and then 3 that are face up on both sides of the buildings that you may be able to purchase and build later on, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. Then you have the Crusade cards and the event cards. Every player is going to start with a random face-up Crusade card, and you may gain more later. Crusades are things that you can have your monks go on by placing your workers there in order to gain prestige points and rewards in the form of resources or different bonus tokens that you can use in order to make your abbey stronger. Events are the things that the players are going to have to deal with, and they're sometimes good. There's periods of plenty where everyone's going to be gaining resources, but usually bad, like Viking raids and disasters like I mentioned before. Now, some of the other things that you start off with the game, all these the little cubes that you have of your color represent peasants, and you'll start one off back in the pews of your the starts of your abbey. You'll also have a little purple cube here representing the start of your training of your clergy, so that they may be able to go up through the ranks of friar to deacon to bishop to priest. Like I said, you'll start off with some resources, which you have here at the bottom of your board. And one thing I'll mention now, all resources have a different gold value as well, which is going to matter when you're trading resources later, so something to keep in mind. Each player also starts off with a set of starting towers. You have 2 battlements, 2 gate towers, a chapel, and a bell tower. And you'll be able to build these later on during the build phase. But you only have spots, even though there's 6 towers, you only have spots for 4 of them. So you need to decide what special bonuses are most worthwhile to you, and then decide to take up one of your precious spots by building that tower. So the easiest way to go through the King's Abbey is just to go through the different phases, and I'm going to do that quickly here. The first phase of the game is simply rolling your dice. You're going to start off with 9 dice of your color and 1 dice off to the side. Now the blue player is going first, so the blue player actually had to stick a die over on the initiative spot. So the blue player is actually, whoever is the starting player, is only going to have 8 dice to roll. So you'll roll all of those, and then those are going to be the dice that I very poorly rolled there, that you're going to start off with when you get to the Abbey placement phase, which is the first phase you're actually going to be able to use those dice. So we're going to get back to that in a second. The second phase of the game is drawing an event card. So you're going to go to the event deck, and you're going to draw the top card off of the stack. Now there are 3 different types of cards in the event stack. One of them is the Vikings cards, and I'm actually going to explain these last. I'm just going to show them to you now. The other 2 are disasters and Year of Plenty cards. So the Year of Plenty and disaster cards are simple. You're going to draw it, read it, and the players have to do whatever it says. So Year of Plenties are good cards. Like for instance, this one says each player may build 1 building for free, but must have that building in their personal supply. Disaster cards are bad, but they're also very simple. So this one says the Abbey Epidemic. Each player loses 1 peasant from their Abbey and chooses 1 die not to be used this round. I'll give you some other examples of them. This one says, for the Year of Plenty, the player in last place gets initiative. He or she places a die on the initiative space and collects the top initiative resource token. And another is disaster card. Abbey Scandal. Any player with their clergy training cube on any of the 4 middle squares loses a level of training. That would be if they're in the middle spot down there. There we go. Right in that middle spot. So that's all that will happen if you draw one of those. And by the way, you kind of construct at random the event deck, having 2 disasters, 2 Years of Plenties, and 3 of the Viking cards. Now the Vikings are a threat that all the players hopefully need to team up on in order to take out together. You have different spots here that you're going to need to fill with workers in order to fend off the Vikings. And like I said, you'll have to be working together. So for instance, when the Viking card is drawn, whoever is the last player is going to take the 4 black dice that are in the game. You're probably wondering what those are for. Roll them and put them on the side of the card. So I got 1, 2, 3, and 5. And puts them over in the Viking spots on the card. Now, starting with the start player, you have to try and match dice that you've rolled against those numbers. So for instance, the first die here is a 1. If the starting player has a matching die of a 1, they must place it there. And in fact, they keep doing that for every die that matches. So if I was a starting player and I happen to have 1, 2, 3, and 5, I'd have to take all 4 of those dice and match them up with those Viking dice. And in this case, just for this example, I have only, well, yeah, I don't have that. So I only have 1 and 2. Now, if I can't match up with at least one of those, then instead I have to take one of my peasant cubes and put it on the spot that I would have had to fill. And then it passes to the next player. Now, even if I have dice, I don't have to keep placing dice if I don't want to. As long as I can put 1 on there, that's sufficient. But if I have to put a peasant cube down, I lose a prestige point. If I match a die, instead I actually gain a prestige point. So it actually behooves me to place dice out there. Now, once every player has either put a die down, at least 1 die, or has put down a cube, then we see if the Vikings have defeated us or not. If there are more cubes than dice on our side, then we have lost. The Vikings have won, and each player is going to have to destroy one of their buildings, either a building they built or a tower, which could be very, very annoying. But if we have more dice than cubes, then we have won. And you're going to look at whoever has placed the most dice on our side of the track. And whoever has placed the most dice is going to get a bonus reward of 3 prestige points. So that is the entire draw and event card phase. Then we're going to go to the Abbey dice placement phase. And this is simply where we're going to take any workers that we still have remaining at this point after whatever the event card is, and we're going to place them around the different parts of our own personal Abbey in order to do different things. So like, for instance, one of the things we can do is get more peasants. So on our board, it's kind of hard to see here, but there are little dice indicators for 1, 2, and 3. This means that we can place any up to 3 dice that are either 1, 2, or 3 into this section of the Abbey. And depending on how many dice I put there, I gain that many peasants in the back of the pew. Instead of doing that, I could also choose to train clergy. And that's the same thing except that I need numbers 4, 5, and 6. And when I do that, instead I'm going to move my purple cube of clergy training up this one of the tracks. It starts off as a lowly monk, but it goes up the ranks of friar, deacon, bishop, and priest. So you have 3 spaces here. Every time that, for every die that you spend, you move up one of these spaces. Whenever the cube reaches the tops of one of those tracks, they immediately gain that rank and you gain a bonus. So for instance, at the top of the friar track, the peasants gain a +2 movement bonus. At the top of the deacon track, there's +1 defense. And at the last one, for the priest, you gain 2 defense and you gain 4 prestige points. So this is an action you can be working on the whole time in order to gain some really great benefits from it. Now you can also choose to use your monks in order to defend your abbey. There's lots of different ways you can improve your defense rating, which is this up here, which is the big blue cube. You always start off at 1. And there's different things you can build in order to get your defense rating up, but if you really need to defend yourself in a pinch, you can instead use your workers as defensive capabilities. You have them man the walls, essentially. So I would put them to the right of wherever my tracker is. If my defense was already all the way up at 4, I could put them here, and now I have a defense of 7. Another type of thing I could do is the Crusade. So I said that everyone starts with a Crusade card, and you always need to match up whatever the card says at the top. So for instance, this one that I'm starting off with says that I need 3 of a kind. So I need to put 3 workers, 3 dice of the same kind on this card. And if I do, I gain 4 prestige points, a grain resource, and a wagon token. A wagon is one of the special tokens that you can get that's like a tool that you can use. And wagons will actually let you take extra resources whenever you take the resource action. Now the cool thing about Crusades is that you can actually have other players help you if you want. If you cannot do enough if you don't have enough dice or workers of the right type in order to complete this crusade, you can ask another player, hey, I need another 6. Can you lend me a worker, give me a 6? If you do that, you need to come to some agreement as to what the person who helped you is going to get. Maybe you give them half your prestige points you can earn, or one of the different resources that you would earn. That's entirely up to you, but it's just an optional thing you can do if you really want to complete that crusade. The 4th phase of the game is players going around in clockwise order purchasing 1 or more building cards. Every time that you build a building card, you have to spend the commensurate amount of coins, so 2, 3, or 4 coins. And remember, like I said, there's always going to be 6 cards face up next to these 2 stacks. You have things like the brewery and the garden and the mortars guild. And as soon as you buy the card, there's actually a little indicator at the bottom of the card that tells you what special resources you get just for buying the card. So that might be worth it to you alone. So for instance, if I buy the Mortars Guild, I'm going to get 4 coins. So things are going to keep passing around like this, buying building cards if you want, until everyone passes. Phase 5 is all about placing the rest of your dice out to get resource or initiative. Now the initiative spot is pretty simple. When you place your, if you're the first person to put your initiative die here, you simply will take and start initiative, the starting player for the next round. But that is going to require you to place one of your dice there. And remember that the starting player has to fight the Vikings first next time. But you also get the top resource initiative token first, which I'll get back to in a second. The other thing that you can do is place your workers down on the resource spots. And you're going to keep going, much like with buying the building cards, you're going to keep going around in a clockwise order, placing your dice out. Now, each spot has a total of 6 different spaces here, 4 top ones and then 2 bonus spaces. You may only have 1 bonus space if you're playing with less than 4 players. But what the bonus spaces let you do, normally you can only place 1 die out on one of the top spots. And if you choose to take a bonus space, if there's one available, you can put 2 dice down at one time. But once you've placed one die down there before, you cannot go back and take one of those bonus spots. How this works is that when you place those out there, you're going to gain a number of resources by dividing the total number of pips on the dice that you've placed, die or dice, by the number next to the resources. So let's say that I had done a total of 10 pips here, divided by 4, you lose any remainder. So in this case, I would gain 2 stone. If I had put them down here at the sand, but I had only put a total of 8 here, I'd only get 1 sand because it's 8 divided by 5, it's only 1. And you lose any leftover. But if I had put 10 over here on the grain, I would actually, and the number is 3, I would actually get 3 grain. So the stone and sand are a little bit more difficult to get than the other resources, wood being the easiest. Phase 6 lets you move peasants. Now you start off with 1 peasant in the pews here, and like I said, you can use, during the Abbey phase, you may be able to put more peasants out here. You start off with 1 move, but of course, if you do special actions like promoting monk to friar, you'll gain extra moves, and you'll just move them as close to the front of the pews, the baptistry, as possible. Once the peasant moves into the baptistry, you can actually use them on the buildings that you've already built. Now, everyone starts off the game with a peasant on a random starting building card. In this case, I have a barracks. But when they go onto the sun icon on the card, which let's see if I could focus that a bit, that actually represents the peasant working in that building, and then you're going to gain the bonus on that card. So the barracks says you gain a permanent defense and a plus or minus pip on the first die used to fight the Vikings. So you do want to try and get your peasants up to the baptistry in order to use them in your different buildings. You can even put them on your starting wall cards and you'll get different special bonuses as well. Phase 7 is building. So if you purchased buildings before, now is the time that you get to build them by spending whatever the resources you need are in order to put them into your Abbey. So assuming I had purchased this before, if I was able to pay 3 coins and 3 coins and 3 grain, then I'd be able to build the garden and I would put it into my Abbey. Now, one thing cool that I didn't mention before is that you actually have these trade tokens. Everyone has 2 of them, representing 2 different trades that you can make per round. So you can use a trade in order to trade 1 resource for another, and you're doing it almost in the same way that you would gain resources before. You're going to refer to the numbers out on the board next to each of the resources and try to trade 1 resource for another in whatever the trade value is. So, for instance, each coin is just, worth a value of 1. Wood is worth a value of 2. So I could immediately trade in 8 coins and get 4 wood. Or I can turn 2 pieces of wood into 1 stone, because stone has wood has a value of 2 and stone has a value of 4. But it's always 1 resource for another. By the way, coins don't technically count as resources, but it is something you can use to get more resources with the trade tokens. Phase 8 is the harvest. This is where you do several different things in order. The first is that you can go lambing. If you have built a sheep farm, you may be able to gain sheep at this time. If you had built a garden, which I actually did in my example, I'd also be able to gain grain. And the last thing you need to do in this phase is to feed your peasants. You need to feed them depending on whether you have 1 to 4, 5 to 8, or 9 or more peasants. You need to have 1 grain for every one of those groups of peasants that you have. You can also discard a sheep to feed up to 8 of your peasants if you so choose instead, as long as you have the sheep. But for every, if you're not, you can also use your trade tokens at this time if you really need to, if you just cannot get the grain, or if you can't get the grain that you need in order to feed your peasants. But if you are unable to feed your peasants, you're going to lose a peasants for every level that you're not able to pay for. So it's very important that you save your resources in order to feed your people. Phase 9 is combating the darkness and then moving the darkness. Wherever the current darkness track is at the start of the game, it starts at 3. Each player must have the defenses necessary in order to stave it off. For every level of defense you're missing from where the darkness track is, you're going to have to lose a peasant. So for instance, if I only had a defense of 2, the darkness rating is currently at 3, I'd have to lose 1 of my peasants. After everyone is checked against this, then the darkness track moves up. signifying that we're also getting closer to the end of the round as well. Phase 10 is collecting income. Very simply, every peasant that you have in your pews, in your baptistry, in your buildings, in your towers is going to net you 1 coin. Also, the brewery will give you extra coins as well. In Phase 11, you can actually gain the rewards from your Crusade cards if you had placed dice there. Now, one thing I didn't mention earlier is that you don't actually gain the prestige points for the Crusade cards right away. You'll gain the rewards right away. But if you complete a Crusade, you'll just turn the card face down, and at the end of the game, you'll earn those prestige points. And if someone helps you, they actually have to put one of their peasants out with the die that they're giving to you as well. But during this phase, after you collect your rewards, you also have the chance to purchase new Crusades. In clockwise order, you can spend a coin to draw the top card off of the Crusade deck and get a new one, but you can never have more than 2 active Crusades at a time. And lastly, Phase 12 is the reset. This is where the player who put their die on the initiative spot takes this starting player meeple, which is this little purple guy right here. And then players take all their dice back from their player boards, complete their completed Crusades, the Vikings card in the main board, slide the building cards down to fill the empty spaces, draw new ones to fill that back up. The game is going to continue over these 12 phases 7 times. You go through 7 rounds of play. At the end of that 7th round of play, then you count up your prestige points. You'll count wherever you are on the prestige track or on the outside of the board. Whatever completed Crusades each player has, they'll earn the points for them at that time. You actually earn negative prestige points if you have leftover buildings and Crusades that you were not able to complete, so it's not a good idea to take too many of those during the course of the game. Then you're going to gain bonus points for sheep that are left over, bonus points for certain buildings like the Money Changer and the tithe farms, things like that. And you'll add up all of your points from these different things, and whoever has the most points is the winner. Ties go to the person who has the most valuable leftover resources. And also, whoever has, if there's still a tie after that, then you rejoice in your shared victory. That is the King's Abbey. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. The King's Abbey is a very interesting worker placement Euro-style game in the sense that, for a few reasons. Number one, you have the dice placement as workers instead of just typically putting out a worker meeple. Surprisingly, not many games have done this so far in the whole worker placement genre. You have games I can think of like Euphoria and Alien Frontiers, which were also on Kickstarter, that use dice placement. But those were very different thematic settings. This is more of a Euro game style setting, which is going to appeal to a wide variety of people. And now you have that cool worker placement dice aspect in this style of game. And also the game is more thematic than most Euro games that I have seen. You have the whole aspect of the darkness track. You're in the Middle Ages, and the Dark Ages are encroaching on you and all these different outside threats that you have to deal with, and you have the event deck together with that is just generally making things difficult for the players, but could be a grand opportunity for you to prove yourself to the king and gain more points. So it's interesting how the theme of the game interacts with the different mechanics at work, while at the same time you have the sort of tight mechanics of that are sort of the hallmark of this type of resource management game. Getting different resources, trading them in, and how you actually gain resources from worker placement is interesting as well, because you're adding up numbers, dividing by the numbers of different values, so it takes some bit of forward planning to figure out which dice you want to place out onto the board in order to get the most bang for your buck, and also deciding whether or not you want to use 2 workers in order to gain control of the bonus spot. But remember that you have to use workers for many different things in this game, including putting workers out in your own abbey to make it stronger, not just sending them out on crusades and not just sending them out to get more resources. You have to very carefully balance how you're going to spend all these workers. Having 9 workers seems like a lot, but it really might not be, depending on all the different things that you want to do. You have to worry about Vikings, you have to worry about getting resources, you have to worry about crusades, you have to worry about strengthening your own defenses for the darkness track at the end of the round, which will hit you if you're not too careful. So you have a lot of different irons in the fire, a lot of different things that you have to worry about, and a lot of different tense decisions that you have to make, all while trying to get your engine going, all while trying to get all these different buildings placed, because it's still a competitive game, and it's not just all of you working together against the forces of darkness. You need to worry about winning as well. So you need to get the right types of buildings in order to get the most points possible. You need to figure out how to get
resources long term, because you also need to feed your people every round, which is something that you see in other games like Agricola as well. But here it's interesting because you have different types of ways that you can hope to feed them, and if you're not able to feed them, you lose peasants, but you don't lose victory points, which isn't quite as stinging as it is in a game like Agricola, so you can sort of come back from that. So there's a lot of different aspects of games, of famous games from the past here in the King's Abbey that seem to be refined and used in different and unique and interesting ways, and that's definitely going to appeal to a lot of people who are looking for a more refreshing take on a Euro-style worker placement resource management game. The Crusades are very interesting as well, because it's another thing that you can do in order to gain points and resources. And just like with the buildings, you don't want to overcommit to them, because you might end up losing prestige at the end of the game, and that could hurt you. But that's going to be of your own volition. You decide how much you want to extend yourself getting these buildings and trying to get them built. Trying to put out towers is another important decision that you have. You only have so many tower spots, but you have multiple different options for you to go. Some of them are easier to build than others, but they might not give you as strong a reward. So how do you want to do that? It can all of it, there's different paths to victory that you have, and as the designer himself mentions in the book, part of the fun of the game, or most of the fun of the game, is deciding in each game how you want to go about getting to victory, having fun making those decisions, and I think that is going to appeal to a ton of people. It's complex enough that it's going to have enough edge to it to hardcore gamers who like this typical style of game, but I think that it's also accessible enough, it's mid-weight enough that people who are not necessarily used to this type of game are going to be able to get into it. They'll be up and running after just a couple of rounds. They'll understand it. Everything will make sense. Again, it will make sense because the theme is tied so tightly into the mechanics. Everything makes sense as to what you do and how you place your workers. And of course, if I put a worker here, they're able to build. And of course, if I put a worker here, they'll get resources for me. It all just makes sense, and that's going to make it easier, a lower barrier of entry for people to get into the game. So I think that there's a wide variety of people who could this game could have grand appeal for, especially since these types of games, Euro games, are hotter than ever, and King's Abbey gives you some very different and unique spins on a lot of the traditional aspects of these types of games. So this is something that might interest you. When the Kickstarter campaign launches, I am going to have a link at the bottom of the screen and down in the comments section. I would urge you to go to the campaign page, find out more information, and consider backing the campaign. That was the King's Abbey from designer Randy Reithert. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.